Hello everyone, David and Karen here from filmcourage.com.
Here's our new Film Courage format. In addition to the audio that you're hearing, we also now have visuals. So if you're listening to this podcast on iTunes and if you want to check out the visuals, please head over to our Film Courage YouTube page, and vice versa. If you're watching this video and you want to sort of download or listen to the podcast, please head over to iTunes.
Today we are so happy to be speaking with filmmaker Marty Lang, also known as Professor Lang at Quinnipiac University in Hamden, Connecticut. And we had the pleasure of seeing Marty in action this weekend at the Q Media Mashup at Quinnipiac University. And it's very obvious that Marty is well loved and respected by his students there. He's a very busy guy. And we were fortunate to see him in action.
Yeah, and in addition to Marty's teaching and spending time with his students, helping them on their films, he's also the writer, director, producer of his debut feature film, Rising Star, which happens to star Gary Plosky, Emily Morris, and Michael Barra, and many more folks. Rising Star is going to be having its world premiere coming up. We know Marty's really excited. His world premiere is coming up at the Seattle True Independent Film Festival, which runs from May 4th to May 12th. And he and many members of his crew all flying out to Seattle. He's talking about getting a penthouse in Seattle, which sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, wow. Well, please welcome to Film Courage, Marty Lang. Welcome, Marty.
Thanks, guys. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you. And for those of you who want to connect with Marty, he is on Twitter. You can follow him at Marty_Lang. Don't forget the underscore. I'm a frequent guy that I frequently messed it up. Marty_Lang. And if you want to learn more about his film Rising Star, please visit risingstarmovie.com.
So Marty, we see you with a bookshelf in the background. Looks like maybe a backpack on the shelf there. Did you just finish teaching your students?
I did, actually. I just finished up class about half an hour ago. On Tuesday nights, I teach a writing and producing media class for upperclassmen. So we had a day full of watching rough cuts of 5-minute silent narrative films. So it was a movie-filled day today.
Oh, very cool. All right.
Nice.
Well, we want to thank you for having us at the Q Mashup. We just flew back in last night, and I have to say, it's such a beautiful campus. We were telling a few people while we were still in Connecticut about it, and I mean, it looks like a ski lodge. It's beautiful.
The student center.
It overlooks, like, what is it, all of Hamden? I mean, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. Our York Hill campus is where the QU mashup took place, and it's really up on a top hill where you can see all of Hamden, all of New Haven. On a clear day, you can see all the way to Long Island Sound. Yeah, it's gorgeous up there. It's a really great place to have an event.
Very cool. Yeah, well, we were very fortunate to attend, so thank you so much for having us.
And really good time.
It was a much-needed break for us here, too, so we appreciate you getting us out of our sort of comfort zone a little bit and flying out there.
Yeah, and one of the favorite parts that we're going to remember is after the Q mashup, we had our private screening of Rising Star that you set up for us on campus, and that was really cool. Sit down, just you and I in our own little private theater watching Rising Star. And then from there, with Lucas McNally, we headed down to New Haven. Had pizza there, and then we sort of strolled over to the park there, right outside the Yale campus, and we got some exclusive sort of park interview video footage. Karen has some really cool photos that she took, so we're looking forward to sharing that sort of additional bonus footage, in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, it should be up in the next few days, actually. So Marty, with your students, when you're in front of them, do you give them any tough love, real-world advice, or do you just stick to the curriculum?
I try to do a little bit of both. The great thing about Quinnipiac is that there's a great curriculum set up now for the students to go through and learn about all the technical pieces of production. But there are times where you need to kind of put your foot down and kind of tell them war stories and things like that, because this is a tough business, and we're not doing our job if we're not really preparing them for when they get out of school and when they enter this world. So whether it's teaching them how to run a crowdfunding campaign like you guys did with us at the mashup, or if it's sitting in class and really hammering home a film that a student may think is perfect but really has some issues. We're doing them a disservice if we're not completely honest with them about what they need to do to get stuff better. So honesty tends to be one of my stronger points in that regard.
Can you give us some examples of a couple Martyisms?
Oh God. Well, the first one is your script will never turn into your film. That's the first thing I always tell them. No matter how, easy you may have something in your head, how specific you have a film in your head, there's always going to be things that pop up that you're not expecting. And I give them examples of that from my own work. When we shot Rising Star, I actually had a part written for myself that I had to cut because we didn't have enough time to shoot it. So that was a little bit of bruised on the ego, but it's what you need to tell these kids. It's filmmaking's tough. So if things don't go your way, you have to learn to be adaptable, and that's really something that I try to teach them. In all my classes, just to try to kind of roll with the punches as much as possible, knowing that the end goal is to create a film that somebody can watch. That's the ultimate thing.
We do have good news for those tuning in, wondering, like, wait a minute, Marty said he just cut himself out of his own film. Are we still going to see Marty in the film? And, as witnesses to the film, we've seen it, and we've seen the little sort of sneak cameo. Marty does find a way to get himself in there. Karen sort of nudged me, and she's like, there's Marty. So you got to look out for that in Rising Star. I want to take it back, Marty, because this is what's really wild to me. You and I went to high school together, the same high school in Connecticut. We played basketball together. So this goes back many years, and it's wild how sort of our lives went off on two different paths, and then sort of found their way back together once again here. But back then, did you have any idea that sort of filmmaking was in your future? Back when I knew you from Newington High School.
I didn't think that filmmaking would be in my future, but I knew that storytelling would be. When I was 13, 14 years old, the one goal that I had in my life was to become a journalist. I always wanted to write for newspapers. I wanted to write for magazines. And that was sort of my one goal going through high school and college. And it was funny, the only film exposure I ever had through undergraduate was when I worked at Blockbuster when I went to UConn. And then I took one screenwriting class my last semester as an undergrad. And that sort of propelled me into that world a little bit more. So, when I was a kid, I was always telling stories. I was always writing stuff. And it was funny, when I was 13, I remember writing in my middle school yearbook that my one goal was to be a reporter for the New York Times. And it worked out. When I was 22, I actually did it. So that was kind of cool.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that. Did you have an artistic family growing up?
I think the big thing that we had in our family was music. I know my dad was a huge fan of Andre Rieu, the orchestra director. So there'd always be music playing in the house, while we were growing up. And I wasn't so much an orchestral fan. I was more of a hip hop fan when I was growing up. So I listened to a lot of that kind of stuff. But I think music was probably the biggest piece of the arts that we had growing up. I'd go see movies, just like everybody else would, but for us, it was more about Animal House and Ghostbusters than it was, something like The Godfather. So,
were you encouraged to be creative?
Yeah, no, definitely. Oh, both my parents were very supportive in that, and still are. And my mom is one of my biggest fans now, which is great. And was a huge help to us while we were making the film. Yeah, that was one thing that was really cool about growing up. My sister was actually an outstanding actress. She got involved in a lot of drama and like musicals in high school and stuff like that. I never did any of that because I was playing basketball a lot, and that kept me out of the time frame to actually play in the plays, as you remember, Dave. But I played saxophone in the band, and went to Disney World and performed at Epcot Center and stuff like that. So there was definitely a big musical bent to me when I was growing up.
You said, you really, filmmaking really didn't sort of come on the scene for you until really, at the tail end of your college career, after your college career, which is somewhat unusual. You often find that filmmakers, for them, the journey begins, maybe in their early teenage years. Do you remember what your first filmmaking experience was?
I do, actually. Yeah, and it was pretty bad now that I think about it. My best friend Damien, we had made a film with his brother and his sister and the family dog and a huge plush bunny. We did this stupid heist film called The Quest for the Queen's Jewels, and it was like maybe 3 minutes long. It was all one take. It was all in camera. I must have been like probably 16 or 17 years old. And it was fun and it was cool. It was something good to do for the day. but I never really thought that it was something that would become kind of a career for me. It wasn't until, a lot later on, after I got out of undergrad that I started thinking about it more seriously.
And then, so what was it exactly when, you started to get into a little bit more? Can you talk about when you first started believing in yourself as a filmmaker? Because that's the crucial part. Is you have to get to a point where it's like, you know what, there's something I'm doing here where I need to keep doing this.
Right. Well, there were two big moments. The first one was obviously the first film that I ever worked on. I had found out that I went, for some reason, I thought that all the films that were being made in the world, you could find them in one place. So I went out and I bought an issue of the Hollywood Reporter, and I looked through it for all the films that were in production, and there was only one in Connecticut at the time. And it was a film called A Little Bit of Lipstick. It starred Mia Tyler, Liv Tyler's half-sister, and Soupy Sales, if you remember him.
Yeah.
So I went to go work on that film as a PA, and I stayed on that film for a better part of 3 years and just kept showing up. I was a boom operator when we were in production. I was the post supervisor. And then by the time the film was done, I was the only person that was still working with the director, so he gave me a producer credit. So that turned out to be amazing. So that really kind of gave me the confidence that I could do it, or I could learn to do it, because I had gone through the process once and kind of knew what it was. But as far as thinking about it as a career, I still hadn't really confirmed on that until I had an interview, actually, when I was writing for the New York Times. I had a chance to sit down and have lunch with Amy Brenneman. I don't know if you remember her. She was on Judging Amy. She was in Heat. She actually was getting an award at a Connecticut college, and they sent me out to interview her and kind of find out, what the whole story was, because she grew up in Connecticut. She's from Glastonbury, and her mom, was a longtime resident, a judge here. And she really talked to me about what the business was like and what a life was working in film. And it really kind of sounded exciting to me. And I never really thought about it in those terms. I always thought about it as something fun to do, maybe, something to do in your spare time. So after I did that interview, it kind of hit me, maybe this is something that I could do for a career. And that's where it started to build from there. So that really was kind of a turning point for me.
Tell us where you were in your life when you wrote the script for Rising Star.
Not the best place. I had a job. I was working for a company that built boilers. It was an engineering company, and they had just started up a video division. And I came in there to help them with making training videos and stuff like that. Not exactly Gone with the Wind. And one of the things that we used to do was they would have us travel. We'd go down to other plants in Tennessee and in other countries. Went to the Czech Republic. We got to go to Paris. We got to go to Germany. And while we were on those flights, while we were traveling, I would just sort of jot down ideas, because that job really took up a lot of my life. And I really wanted to keep it as long as I could, because honestly, it paid pretty good. So I wanted to, try to stay there as long as I could. And I started realizing that other pieces of my life were suffering as a result of it. So it just started, it was kind of a conversation in my head, like, do I really want to live to work, or do I just want to work to live? So that's kind of where Rising Star began.
At this stage, because how recent was this, Marty, when you're working on the script?
I started working on the script in 2009. I started working on it.
Okay, so you're already sort of in that process of maybe writing and developing and having short films underneath your belt. Because I just think, can you talk a little bit more about, where you were in terms of your career, in terms of starting and stopping many projects? How vital was it for you to sort of maybe write this script and then see it all the way through? I know for me, before I was able to finally get to a point where I'm working on my debut feature film, there are a lot of projects that I sort of started and stopped beforehand.
Yeah, it was really important that this be the first one, I think, because I had a couple projects too that I had started writing, I had gotten halfway through writing, and I never really found the time or the energy to really push through and finish anything. And part of that was because of work, because I was working so much. So, Rising Star was really important because it really was the first project that I saw through script-wise to a point where I thought, wow, I could actually do this. I could actually make this. And it was another kind of transition for me too, because that would have been, and ultimately became, the first project that I directed in addition to producing. Up until that point, I had produced, I think it was 6 feature films, associate producer, co-producer, producer, working in that job. And, they had all been seen through and they were all created and they were all finished. And I think 4 of them ended up getting distributed. So I had a pretty good track record as a producer, but I hadn't taken that next step and really created a project from nothing that I would oversee. And this really would end up being that project. So it really was important, that I get this thing done.
How long did you work on the script for?
A little over a year. In fits and starts. I'd work on it a little bit when I was in the Prague airport, or when I was at the bus station in Tennessee, that kind of thing. So it kind of went in pieces. The other cool thing too about writing this script was I wanted to figure out a way to include a lot of landmarks within Hartford that are culturally relevant to the outside world. So part of the script wasn't so much writing as it was just driving around town and seeing what was there and what I could incorporate into the story. Because I wanted to try to find ways to make the story takes place in Hartford, Connecticut, the capital of the state. But I wanted it to be something that would become much bigger and that a lot more people would be able to identify with because of people like Mark Twain, like the people of that caliber, would make the story a little bit bigger. So I wanted to try to find ways to do that, incorporate those. So that was as much a part of the writing process as the actual writing was.
And at what point did you know for certain, like, this is going to be a film I'm going to make, like, this is going to be the first feature film? And was it at the tail end of the writing process, or did you know fairly early on?
I had a feeling that it would be the one pretty early on, but the only question was when it would happen. Because the whole time that I was writing it, I was still working this job, and I was still trying to hold on to that and work as hard as I could there. Mm-hmm. So to be able to ask for the time off to make that film wouldn't exactly put me at the top of the list for employees. So I wanted to try to keep it in my back pocket as long as I could. But then, fortunately, as it turned out, our whole department got laid off, and that was in the springtime of 2010. So once we got laid off, and I was blessed with an unemployment check, I started thinking, well, if we can do it, we can do it now. So that's when I started rounding up everybody and, talking to Gary and talking to Emily and Michael and trying to make sure that they were available and, casting all the other parts and, starting to really put it together.
We can tell from seeing the film, and you've mentioned sort of going after certain locations and trying to incorporate that into the thing. You tried to write in respect to what you had access to or may have access to, meaning that you kept the production, what would be the production budget down. But as you said, we're going to go out and try to make this film. Did you seek traditional financing? Did you put in an effort to say, okay, we're going to try to get some investors behind this so we can actually make the movie? Or was it something kind of like you knew all along, like, when I go to make this, I'm going to have to sort of, maybe put my own money into it to see this through?
Well, I kind of knew I'd have to put some of my own money into it to get it made, only because I wasn't willing to wait that long. We had tried to apply for funds through the city of Hartford. They actually have a really great grant program for people in the arts, and we had applied for what ultimately would have been about 2/3 of the production budget through the city. And I foolishly went on the assumption that we were going to get that as we kept going through pre-production. And as it turned out, we didn't get it. So we had to kind of change gears then. We had 2 other investors that put in a small amount of money. But when it came down to it, we had the Kickstarter campaign, which we were talking about running from the beginning anyway. But that became sort of the money that would get us through production. And that ultimately ended up, costing us a little bit more that I ended up paying for to get us through production. And then we sort of regrouped after we shot it. But I kind of knew from the beginning, we wanted to try to find bigger investors, and we had a couple meetings and people were interested, but no one really committed with a check. So we kind of hit the point where we said, we're just going to go ahead and do this ourselves because it's really the only way it's going to happen.
And I love the lead character in the film, Eliza. What can you tell us about her?
Well, Eliza is played by Emily Morse, and Eliza's a character who is sort of the opposite of Chris, the lead character in the film. She's kind of a bohemian, kind of a free spirit, really doesn't live by any structure in life. She has a lot of different interests artistically, but she really doesn't have one major avenue that she's committed to yet. So it's kind of interesting because she plays well off of Chris, who has his one avenue that he devotes everything to, and he ends up, in a rough situation as a result of that. We find out through the course of the film that Eliza's having a little bit of trouble spreading herself as thin as she does. So having these two characters kind of play off each other is nice because they represent both extremes of the work-life continuum.
And is that what drew you to this dynamic? You like those extremes, or what was it about those two characters? Why did you put them together?
Well, I mean, honestly, both of those characters are different facets of my own personality. I mean, there are times where I get so maniacally devoted to something that I put the blinders on and I can't see anything else. And there are other times where I'm spread so thin, I'm doing a million different things and I can't give the energy that each thing deserves. So I thought it was important to show both of those extremes because honestly, neither one is healthy. And what I hope the film sort of communicates is that finding that balance really is the key to finding a fulfilling life.
So was it questioning that 40-hour work week sort of world that drew you to this film because you were living it at that time, or probably more than 40 hours with all the travel and everything? Was that what...
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was something that needed to be explored because so many other people are dealing with that now.
Yeah.
I mean, when we made it, it was a little closer to the 2008 economic crisis. But even now, it's much the same. People are worried about the jobs that they have, how long they're going to have them. Every day becomes sort of a stressful day because is today the day that I get laid off? Starts creeping in your head and you start thinking about that every single day. And I knew that because that's what I was dealing with when I was at that job. So and I'm single, I don't have kids, I don't have a family. So I can only imagine how much more stressful it is if you have people that depend on you and you're dealing with something like that. So that really, the more I thought about that, the more I kind of realized this is something that can connect with a lot of people.
Absolutely. And Marty, you mentioned that the state of Connecticut was so accommodating in helping you to secure the locations of Rising Star. What's involved in shooting around the Hartford area and other towns in Connecticut?
Honestly, not that much. It was a really smooth process for us. We approached the city of Hartford. We approached the mayor's office, and at the time, the woman who was the communications director, really took to us. Really liked the project. She forwarded us. There's no real set in stone film apparatus within the city, but there's a permitting office that's there, for any time you want to have an event in a public space. So we talked with the permitting director and he literally gave us, carte blanche, whatever we wanted, as long as we just, had all the information given to them, given to the police, things like that. It really worked out very smoothly. Any city street we had access to at any time, didn't have to pay for it, didn't have to pay for police. It was really smooth. And as far as some of the other places in town, the private places, it's just like anything else. You go in, you talk with the owner of the place, and try to get permission that way. But even in that case, that worked out smoothly too because we made a little press before we went into production, so a lot of people knew about us as we were coming around. So honestly, the process was pretty smooth.
I mean, were you scared at all in terms of what you had written into the script, and then actually approaching the Mark Twain House and
Sully's?
You have Sully's, the bar there, the sort of the nightclub rap bar. You have another club that you sort of use, another bar location. I mean, were you sort of scared of wait a minute, we might not be able to get these locations, especially at our production budget level?
I was horrified. And I honestly thought that something would fall apart at some point, but nothing ever did. We shot the film the way I wrote it in the places that we wrote it for, and amazingly, everyone kind of helped out and did what they could to accommodate us. Two great stories. With Sully's, as we were, getting ready for pre-production, I hadn't been in the bar when I was writing the script. I knew of the bar because Emily, who played Eliza, the first time she ever did an open mic was at that bar. So I kind of wrote it just assuming, that we'd be able to go down there and get it. I never went down there before we got into pre-production. But as soon as we did, and the word started getting out about the film, I got an email on Facebook from the owner of Sully's saying, if you need to use my bar or restaurant, come down and you can use whatever you want. So I don't know if he found out about us ahead of time. He's friends with Emily, so maybe they talked ahead of time. I don't know. But that was really nice. I went down and I talked with him, and he hugged me when I walked in the bar. So that turned out very nice.
But not only that, because you told us this story when we just saw you, and you actually brought him the script, and you're like, I want you to read this script. That's just such a serendipitous moment. It's unbelievable.
It was great. It was really cool, and it made me feel really good, that we'd have the goodwill that we'd need to get through this whole process. It was really nice. And then, like with the Mark Twain House, I didn't think no feature film had ever shot in the Mark Twain House before us. We're the very first one. So when we went down there, I expected some sort of resistance or maybe, a play for money. And there was, and we told them, look, we're not shooting with, with any money at all, but, can we make this work? And what we suggested was, look, the Twain House has been having financial problems, as many nonprofits have in the last few years. So we said, look, if you let us shoot in this house for a much reduced rate, normally they charge about $400 an hour. We got in there for about $50. So they said that if we can go in there and shoot, for the 5 hours that we need it, in exchange for that reduced rate, when we get a rough cut of the film, we'll play it at the Mark Twain Museum, and you can keep all the ticket proceeds. So what ended up happening was when we screened there, we sold out. So what they would have made $2,000, had they charged the normal rate, they made almost twice that because of the tickets that they got from us. So it worked out for everybody involved. It was a really good deal.
Yeah, I love hearing that, especially hearing sort of the hustle that you put in behind the scenes, man. That's just great to hear, and also just all this about the sort of the local community getting behind your production efforts. That's what we love about regional filmmaking, because you can have that support of sort of your local community. They love getting behind these projects, and when you watch Rising Star, you see the production value. It's just through the roof. Like you're taking this modest Kickstarter budget. You guys raised $16,000 or $20,000 on Kickstarter.
$15,000 we raised.
$15,000 on Kickstarter. I know you've had some small investors put in some of their own money. You put in a little bit more of your own money just to raise the budget slightly. But you're easily seeing like this six-figure production value budget. When you actually see it all translated on a film, and it's just really great to see. Can you talk a little bit about? Were there any challenges securing location? Any locations throughout the film, and also what was the grand total that you guys spent for your locations?
Well, I can tell you our grand total for locations was about, I think it was $500, because we spent about, I think it was about $3 at the Mark Twain House, and the rest of the money we spent getting access to a Hartford City bus that we were able to use driving around town.
Nice.
That's all we spent.
That's great.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, it worked out really good.
And that's an advantage, for anyone outside of Los Angeles, outside of New York, outside of the major cities. That's an advantage you guys have with the regional filmmaking. That you just see that people do want to support local filmmaking.
Yeah, it's a big thing. When you're shooting a film in Hartford, you're not one of a number of films that are shooting there. You're the first film that's been there in 6 months, in a year. In 5 years, that kind of thing. So people really are excited, when you get a film coming in town. So, and as a regional filmmaker, I think that's one of the biggest things that draws me to it, is the idea that you can go into an area where there's not normally a lot of production. So the people that are there, and I hate to use this word, they're not jaded of the production that's there, and they're not, looking, to serve their own financial interests first. they're willing to work with you, and in a lot of cases, you get access to things that you might not get access to. You can find resources that you might not usually get resources from. We found a number of our locations, a number of the houses that you see in the film, we found by Facebook. We actually set up a Google Doc. If anyone has any help that they'd like to offer us, Gary Plosky was great in setting this up with us. There were people that were offering us things left and right. Like we had an offer. A gentleman, a farmer, had access to a herd of goats and said that if we wanted to, we could use his goats in our film. That made me want to write a scene with goats in it because I never thought I'd have access to anything like that. So, that kind of thing is really cool. You never know where you're going to find help from. And we found locations that way. People actually left notes on the Google Doc that they were willing to let us shoot in their home. I mean, as a filmmaker, you pray for that stuff. So it really, really worked out well.
Wow. Be careful, Marty, because you're giving Karen all these ideas. Next thing you know, she's going to set this all up and make a film of her own in Connecticut.
Well, too, and you were interviewed by the Hartford Courant and then also Channel 3 News, something like that. It looks like you had some press there. I'm curious too about the economic development plan that you implemented with Rising Star. I know you touched on that on the movie site. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, one of the things that I was trying to do with the making of this film was to prove to the state and to people living here that the film industry can be something that can create business for a lot of people. We tried to partner with local businesses that were giving discounts for customers if they mentioned the movie. Part of the press that we did, I actually got in touch with the Hartford Business Journal, and they did an article, about us and how we were trying to use as much local vendors as possible. Our entire crew was from Connecticut. The vast majority, 98% of our crew is from Connecticut. We have a workforce development program in the state for the film industry. It's called the Connecticut Film Industry Training Program. And we were able to pull a number of the brightest graduates out of that program to come and work on this film. And a number of them have since gone on to earn their union cards. Now they're working on bigger films now. So, I wanted to really use this film as an example to the state that, the film industry isn't all $100 million films. There are homegrown companies that are trying to sprout up here to make these films. And it really, I think it did, catch a lot of people by surprise as we were going through it. I'd do radio spots, for like business-oriented shows and things like that. And it was a different way for people to think about a film being made, an indie film being made, rather. You think of a $100 million film coming into the state, they're going to spend a ton of money. There's going to be a lot of economic return from that. But the smaller films can do that too. And that really helped to kind of educate people here about how that can happen.
Marty, I'm listening to you, and very bright guy, very personable. I'm just like listening to the efforts you're putting in behind the scenes with what you're doing in Connecticut. Does this sort of effort, would that translate to other people in Connecticut or other people in smaller towns throughout the country? Do you think that they'd be able to take some of the stuff that you're doing and doing it wherever they are in their homeland?
I sure hope so. Obviously every area is going to be different as far as what the political climate is, but there are certain things that are consistent no matter where you are. And that is, if you make a film in a town, you're going to spend money in that town. And if you want to help with developing a workforce in a particular area, shooting a film in that area will provide opportunities for those people to work on it. So I think, I've been lucky in Connecticut because we've been very progressive as far as finding opportunities to develop this industry here, and I'm forever grateful for that. Governor Rell, she started the tax credit program in 2006, and Governor Malloy has continued it since he's come into office a year ago. So we've been lucky here in that we have a tax credit program here. We have a workforce development program. Not many states have that. But it's also taking advantage of what you do have. That's a big part of it too. So if you're living in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and you want to try to get a film like this off the ground, you can do a lot of the things that we did to try to make a film like this. But I think it's important, when you're looking at it this way, you really have to start when you write the script thinking about these things. Because if you're looking to incorporate, items of local interest, state interest, national interest, you need to find them, and then you need to find a way to build a story around them. So it really comes back to what you're writing and how you plan for that. And we really did that from the beginning. Like, we were talking, the whole idea for this film started when Gary Plosky and I went to go see a film called Medicine for Melancholy that played in New York. And my friend Barry, I went to film school with him. He directed it, and the film just blew me away. It was beautiful. It was amazing. But it really had a political bent to it in that, the city of San Francisco was a major character in that film. So we started talking that night, is there a way that we can make a film about Hartford that's sort of the same idea, that kind of makes the city a character there? And that's what got us talking about, okay, well, it would need to include Mark Twain somehow. It would need to include Wallace Stevens somehow. Those are sort of the basic ideas. And then as things started to take shape, you can build from that. But it's really got to be something that you think about from the beginning of your production.
And then what about the next step? Once you have it built into your script, who do you begin to reach out to first, and then how do you go about doing so?
Well, obviously it's a case-by-case thing. For us, I thought it made the most sense to approach the city first, because if you can get the city behind the project, they have inroads to whatever cultural landmarks are within its borders. So if the city's on board and they enjoy the project and they think it's going to be strong, they can refer you to someone who works at the Mark Twain House. They can call, the cemetery owner where Wallace Stevens' gravesite is, and they can lay the foundation for you so that when you show up, you're not just Joe Filmmaker, you're the guy that the city called about. And I think that makes a big difference, if you don't have press out already about what the project is, to have someone in your corner from the very beginning. I think that's a really strong way to go about, trying to get a film like this going.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Thank you for sharing, Marty. In terms of coming back, in terms of getting this film off the ground, you did decide that, hey, you know what, we're going to go with Kickstarter for this. Can you talk a little bit about that decision to turn to crowdfunding, to turn to Kickstarter for the production budget?
Yeah, I got to be honest, and it's funny that I'm talking to you guys about it. Goodbye Promise was a big reason why we decided to do a Kickstarter campaign.
Oh, that's good.
Because we saw what you guys had done, and I knew nothing about it at that point at all. So, and I was scared to death of it, But the more we looked at it, and the more Gary had done a lot of research about it too before we got going, and it looked like it was something that was doable for us, and. The thing that's a little bit different in our approach for the Kickstarter campaign versus the majority of them was that we thought we'd be able to get the majority of the money from people locally. So we weren't thinking so much looking nationwide and international, for the crowd. We thought, okay, well, there's 400 graduates of the Connecticut Industry Training Program. Maybe we can get $5 from all of them. So, we had the email lists and we knew those people. And we knew a lot of people that were local, all the above-the-line filmmakers had their own networks, that we were able to utilize. But it ended up, we got 86% of our donations from people that we knew. So that was sort of a flip, from what most successful campaigns are doing now. But we knew that we'd be able to get a strong amount of money in small amounts from those people. So when we started it, that was kind of how we focused it. And it took... we kind of had, like all the other campaigns, we had the big start and then we had the lull all the way through. We had a 45-day campaign and there were about 30 of them where nothing happened, which freaked me out. And then, as we started getting towards the end, like all the other campaigns, we started getting a little bit of a rise. And, we got a huge donation from a friend of mine who went to high school who won Powerball, and that helped us huge.
That's nice.
Yeah, that always helps. And we ended up getting our goal. So it was a different kind of structure, than most campaigns would do, but ultimately, was successful.
And how big was your crowdfunding team? Was it just you and Gary?
There were basically 3 of us that were at the helm. Gary and I, and then our producer, Matt Giovanucci. We were sort of like the keys to the campaign. And the 3 of us, we kind of took it home.
Yeah, we met Matt this weekend. It was great.
Yeah, it was fun meeting Matt. Mm-hmm. And something we haven't necessarily brought up a lot here on Film Courage is I mean, do you believe? I mean, you know, we have crowdfunding, but do you believe that filmmakers should use crowdfunding more than once? You know, just keep going back and keep crowdfunding over and over again.
Well, it depends. It depends on a lot of things. You know, one is the size of the project. Another one is the time in between projects. If you're trying to do something every 6 months and you're going to the well to the same people, I think it's a legitimate concern that those people might get tapped out. You know, and you also have to worry about following through on what you promise. You know, if you raise a certain amount of money for a film and that film doesn't get made, your credibility takes a big hit. And in the crowdfunding world, your reputation is gold. And that's what people go to. You know, so I mean, we made it a point, and I mean, even now, you know, 2+ years, I think, after completing our campaign, we're still getting perks back to people. We're still making videos that we promise people. And it may take us through the summer to get all that stuff done. So, you know, you got to make sure before my own view is that if you're going to do crowdfunding multiple times, you want to make sure that whatever you're working on now is completely paid back, completely finished. The project is done. It's out to who it needs to go to. And all of that has been taken care of. In my view, only at that point can you go back to the well and say, okay, now I'm working on this. And in that case, I think it's a good thing, because now you have a successful campaign behind you, or more, you know, depending on what point you're in. That's the biggest deal. You know, it's all about what your reputation is, and if people can trust you to get done what you say you're going to get done. I think that's the biggest thing.
You know, and you mentioned earlier that you know you would love to teach a course, you know, at Quinnipiac that sort of revolves around crowdfunding, and we met one of your students there at Quinnipiac, who is currently crowdfunding for his film right now, his wrestling documentary about a fellow student. Wait, did I say wrestling? I mean bodybuilding. I'm sorry, bodybuilding documentary. Forgive me. You know, what happens when you do have a student, or maybe there's a fellow filmmaker here that's watching or listening? What advice would you give to them in terms of like they're sort of teetering of like, should I crowdfund or should I not? What would you tell them?
Oh, crowdfund, definitely. But take the time to learn how it works first. I think, you know, one of the things that you had actually said, Dave, you know, at the mashup, makes a lot of sense for you to go and actually follow someone else's campaign and get the word out about them to see what your own reach is. I think that's a huge thing, and I wish we had done that before we had started up with ours, because it would have helped me understand a little bit more the idea of, you know, the nodes, you know, the people who can then get the word out for you to their networks. That didn't totally make sense to me until we were in the middle of the campaign. And had I known that before, I probably would have taken the time to, you know, to really figure that out and see how big my own influence was, you know, within the social media world. Yeah, I mean, if you take the time to really follow a couple campaigns that are similar to yours, you know, figure out, you know, what perks are and what levels you put them at, and exactly what you'll be giving out. You know, I think anybody can do it, and I think anybody can be successful. I mean, Corey, the student of mine that you guys had met and that you guys worked with, he's amped unbelievably right now. I saw him today, and he's like, I can't believe like how much I learned. It was the greatest thing ever. And now he's putting in that work. He's going to be successful. He's going to meet his goal. And then what that's going to do is that's going to get him even more jazzed for when he graduates, and when he wants to do his own project, he'll have the confidence to put something together where he can make a bigger amount of money.
Yeah, no, I love the idea of crowdfunding while you're in college. I mean, you just have access to so many people all around you every day. I mean, it's
who are all on social media too.
Yeah, they're all you know. It's a very enviable position to be in. You know, swinging over to the distribution side of things, because now the film is complete. I mean,
Yep.
you know, you've worked quite a while. You know, getting this film done. It's done. In terms of your mindset, your strategy for distribution, you know, we know it's going to be premiering at the Seattle True Independent Film Festival. Did you always have film festivals in mind, you know, from day one of like, this is where we're going with this film once it's completed?
I did in the local sense, the local regional sense. The plan that we had, and we have an Excel spreadsheet that lists all the festivals that we're targeting. We wanted to make sure that this film made a huge splash in New England. That was the goal for us, because it's a film about Connecticut. It's kind of a romantic film. It's really, I think audiences will respond positively to it. What we wanted to do was really get the New England film community excited about us. And to that end, what we ended up doing, the Connecticut Film Festival, which is the big festival here at home, I've worked for them for about 5 years. I'm their educational director. And what I did was I brought them on board instead of the other way around. I told the director, Tom, I said, look, I want to debut this film and I want it to make a big splash. I want your press resources for it, and I want you to share in the success of it, because I think it's really going to make a big, splash in the state. So what we did, we decided that we were going to do two things. We're going to have an opening weekend of playing the film in Connecticut, 2 nights, once privately at a private location, which we're still trying to lock down, but then another public location where people could come and see it for free. The idea being, the more people that can come and see it and the more positive buzz that we can get out of it, the better it'll help everybody. And then what we were going to do after that was we were going to give the film to the Connecticut Film Festival so that they can play it at all their different spots. Connecticut's an interesting film festival in that they don't have a once annual fest. They play all year long, and they play all over the state in different theaters. So what we're doing is we're giving them the film and saying, take it with you on your tour over the course of this year, so that when it plays theatrically, it'll play in New Haven, Connecticut one weekend, it'll play in Stamford, Connecticut the next weekend, different parts of the state, so that more people can get an idea of what the film is. And what we think that's going to do is that'll increase our visibility for when we go for online DVD or VOD deals that we may do down the line. We're keeping the focus for this film regional, because we think we can gather more interest that way. And then whatever we get outside of that is bonus, obviously, and we're hoping that we can get a lot of that. The Seattle Festival will definitely be a part of that. But really, we're concentrating on making sure that the New England states know about us, screen us, and people get excited about us.
I mean, can speaking of regionally, can you talk about, how are you going to go about doing that? Like, what are you going to put into? I mean, who are you reaching out to? Who are you getting involved? Who are you spreading the word to within sort of New England, that northeast part of the country, to build that buzz? What exactly are you doing?
Well, there's two things. We've got the New England film festivals are the ones that we're approaching now. So like Rhode Island International, New Hampshire, Maine International, Woods Hole in Massachusetts. Those types of festivals are the ones that we're applying to. And there's already advanced buzz about us at a lot of them. So that's definitely good. And then once the Connecticut Festival, once the Connecticut premiere happens, we'll reach out again to them, to try to get more word out about it. And the other thing that we're trying to do, and this is sort of kind of like a work in progress, we're trying to find independent theaters within those states that we can go to have our own theatrical events at. And that would be separate of the festivals, but it would be kind of an extension of the theatrical run that would come, I'm hoping, after the first 2 or 3 festivals that we play at. So then when we start going to these places where we control the ticket sales, and we have, obviously, can get a lot more profit-wise, there'll be word about the film already, and people will be interested to come and see it because of a hopeful, successful festival screening, in a particular state. So that's kind of where we're going with it.
Did you receive any personal contact from other large festivals? And if so, who reached out to you and what did they say?
Well, we had contact from a couple big festivals. We won the IndieWire Project of the Month last September. And as a result of that, we were able to get a consultation with the Sundance Institute. And it worked out nicely because since it was September, it was right around the deadline for features to be sent to them. So they had asked us to see the film, and it wasn't done at that point, so we sent them a rough cut of it. They watched it, and we had a consultation with a woman named Kim Utani, who's one of the coolest people I've ever talked to. Really kind of like broke down the process of how Sundance picked their films and told us, you have a strong film and it's going to play well at festivals. It ultimately didn't get in. So we didn't get that chip, unfortunately. We also, after we had won the IndieWire contest, we got a call from Tribeca, and they were interested in seeing us as well as a result of winning that. So we sent them a copy, And then when they were about ready to select their films, they had contacted us and asked us to send the newer version of it because they were still interested in us at that point. So we sent that new version to them, the almost final cut, probably like a month before we finished the film. And we got a letter from them. The film was in the conversation of getting in, but ultimately there wasn't room for it. So we didn't get into that one either. But the cool news is Seattle True Independent, where the film is going to world premiere, that's the first festival that's seen the finished version of the film.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, we're 1 for 1, so that's pretty cool.
Okay, very nice. Well, Marty, you're active on Twitter, very popular. What made you join it? Some people are still not sure about Twitter. What made you join it?
Gary Plosky made me join Twitter.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, it took him.
Gary Plosky.
It took him about 2 years to do it. I was originally really skeptical. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know how it could help. I didn't know anything. But I started. He finally wore me down. I got an account. And the more I got into it, the nicer it was, the easier it became. Having worked as a journalist, microblogging actually makes a lot of sense to me because it's kind of like writing headlines. So that really it came to me pretty easy, and it's my favorite social networking site now.
Why were you skeptical of it?
Because I didn't know it, honestly. Right. I mean, Facebook makes sense in that, you have a photo element, you have a video element, you have a posting element, stuff like that. But on Twitter, it's 140 characters, and there's these weird things called hashtags, and I don't understand how this works. So it took a little while to kind of get the hang of it, but like anything, you get through the curve, and then you become a good user.
What do you tell your students about Twitter if you do tell them anything?
I tell them you need to be on Twitter, and you need to be on Twitter for more than telling people where you're drinking tonight. I try to get through to them that any kind of social networking is good, but especially for the indie film community, there is a community there, and they're very helpful and they're very supportive. So if you're serious about getting into this, you need to have all the resources at your disposal that you can have. So why not be a part of that community and help them out and have them help you?
And do you tell them any sort of social faux pas they should avoid for Twitter, and also things that they should be doing?
I mean, really, I subscribe to Sherry Candler's rule. For every 10 tweets you have, 9 should be about something else other than yourself. Promoting other people's work, or promoting discussion or anything like that. That's really the big thing. To try to make it more about getting the word out about stuff that you find interesting and information that you think can help people. That's really the biggest thing. As far as faux pas, I mean, there's a million of them. One of my students who's in my advanced filmmaking class, he tweeted me one Friday when we had class, and he tweeted me saying that he wasn't going to be in class today because today was his 21st birthday and he's already so drunk he can't walk. So, it was funny, but I told him, you don't want to do that. So try to keep it, constructive as much as possible.
It's interesting hearing you say that Gary Plosky, an actor, he's the one that persuaded you, the filmmaker, to get on Twitter. Because often me being the filmmaker, I'm often encouraging actors like, hey, you know what, you need to get involved. Whether it be Facebook, Twitter, whatever in terms of social media, and just start engaging and connecting with people. What are your thoughts on that? The fact that here you are, the filmmaker, being sort of guided by an actor, and do we see enough actors building their brands and engaging with people on Twitter, Facebook, etc.?
Well, I think it's great. I mean, Gary really dragged me into the social media world. I had a MySpace page, and I had just gotten on Facebook, maybe 2007, I think, something like that. But he really, since he works in academic technology, he's up on all this stuff. And he was a very, very early Twitter user. And I remember him talking about it, and I'm just like, well, isn't that kind of like text messages? I didn't get it. And since the community's gotten bigger, we get it now. But he's been from the very beginning. You know, he was really, you know, the leader as far as getting us to get onto these networks and how to be successful within them. And I think that's really going to help him in his career. I mean, as actors go, he is at the, you know, at the forefront of actors that are social media savvy. You know, you think of him, you think of Wonder Russell. You know, these are people who have a brand as a performer, you know, and people know who they are almost as much as almost as much because of their presence on these sites as their work itself. So, you know, if you're trying to promote yourself, that's really what you want. So, I mean, these guys, they really know what they're doing, and, you know, I'm sure it's going to pay dividends for them for a real long time.
Who are some other indie filmmakers that you like to emulate on Twitter that, you know, like an Ed Burns or, you know, Kevin Smith? Like, who are some of the sort of the heavy hitters in indie film that you like to emulate? Ted Hope.
Well, I love Ted Hope. He really has, like, exposed me to the higher art of indie film through the stuff that he puts on Twitter. You know, I've found out about films that I never otherwise would have, you know, by reading his feed, by reading his blog. You know, Kevin Smith, his film, he's special to me because his films were the first films that I really watched and loved and thought, wow, you know, maybe I can make something like that. You know, back when I was in college, and you know, and I actually got the chance to meet him. He came to the University of Connecticut to do a speaking engagement, and I snuck past security and met him in the back room, and he was awesome. He was great. You know, I told him Chasing Amy was my favorite movie, and he said that it was his too. So that was pretty cool. You know, those guys are really, you know, people that I look up to a lot. I like Ed Burns, and I like the idea that he's as involved with his audience as he is in the making of his films now through Twitter. I think that's really cool. I like the fact that John Sayles is becoming a little bit more Twitter friendly. I think that's really, you know, he's another idol of mine. So I think that's something that's really cool. I wish more bigger filmmakers would get on Twitter and start sharing, you know, some stuff about the way that they do things. Like if the Coen brothers were on Twitter, I would follow them, and I would I would stalk them forever because I think they're amazing filmmakers, and I think that would be a great way for them to reach their audience.
Yeah, Marty, are you surprised that there is still not a viable distribution outlet or platform for independent film, and do we really need one?
I'm not really surprised that there's not one now, only because we're at a point now where there's so much experimentation. You know, I think we're going to find one. I don't know what that is. You know, I mean, you look at something like Tug as far as theatrical and being able to, you know, to round up crowds to have films come. I think that may be something that really becomes popular as time goes on. You can already see they're partnering with Focus Features for a film called Extraterrestrial that's coming out soon. They're partnering with Tug to do crowdsourced screenings. So I think we're a couple years away from really seeing what the most effective way is. But I think it's something that we need to have because, you know, experimentation is great, but ultimately experimentation won't feed you. So if we can find something that works, it's going to be something that a lot of people are going to gravitate towards, obviously. I think we need that. I'm not saying that's the only way that distribution should be done, whatever that one way becomes. But I think, you know, it's the idea of best practice. You know, whatever becomes most successful is what people are going to gravitate towards. So I think, you know, in the next couple of years, we'll find out exactly what that is.
I mean, do you still... Oops, I started there for a second. Do you still think that independent filmmakers are putting too much emphasis on film festivals, on theatrical screenings, and really, you know, we need to figure out a better way, a more appropriate way to share our work online?
I think the festival model is something that needs to really be revisited. A lot of people have posted on filmcourage.com about such things. I have. I think there is a role for the film festival for an independent film if they're looking to build an audience. But I think it needs to be targeted. Like what we're doing with Rising Star, bringing the film through the Connecticut Film Festival to all these different screenings is something that's going to get us a lot of local press. And that local market is the one that we want to hit with DVD sales, with on-demand screenings, like that kind of stuff, with online viewing. I think the wider a net you cast, the less relevant film festivals become. That's my opinion. If you've got something that's hyper local, I think you can use them to your advantage. And I mean, we're a great example. Like I didn't submit the film to the Connecticut Film Festival. I called the director and said, I want to work, I want to bring you in on this. So it's something where, the filmmaker is really the one driving the creation of this event. And I think the more a filmmaker can do that, the more a filmmaker can take advantage of the press attributes that a festival like that has. And in a lot of cases, a filmmaker may not have relationships with radio outlets, TV outlets, newspapers, stuff like that. So there really is hope and a use for that. If you know exactly who it is that you're targeting. I forgot the second half of your question. Sorry.
It was all about like a viable distribution, or maybe that was the last one. But forgive me, my mind's already moved forward, Marty. I'm already on to my next question.
On to the next one, yeah.
I'm already on to the next. I just want to go back to the Seattle True Independent Film Festival. Thinking of that festival, what are you expecting? What are you honestly expecting? World premiering your film, all the way across the country. This is less than 2 weeks away. How have you been preparing for it, and what are you expecting coming out of it?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we did, once we found out that we were getting in, was that we wanted to make sure that we sold out the screening. That was the biggest thing for us. And we did. We found out about 3 days ago that the screening sold out, so that's cool.
Congratulations.
Wow.
Thank you very much. So now the thing we're trying to do is we're trying to convince the festival to have a screening a second time so we can sell that out too. But what I think the biggest thing that we want to get out of this is just a big splash. We want this film to come out and we want people talking about it out there because Seattle is a huge indie film town. We all know, it's the Lynn Sheltons, the Megan Griffiths of the world, who else is up there? Lacey Levitt, all these great filmmakers that are making all these great films. If we're looking to change our focus from making films on a Connecticut level to films on a national level, where people all over the country will know about us, these are the backgrounds in which we need to play. Because the people that are going to be there will be able to talk to these heavier hitters. It's as much a press strategy as it is anything else. I really want, but I'm trying to contact the Seattle Times right now. They have a movie reviewer. And I'm trying like mad to get her, to come and to review the film. Because if that film review is good, that's in like a top 20 national newspaper. That to me is as good as the New York Times. So if we can do that, and that's part of the reason why I thought Seattle was a good place to go, despite the fact that they were the first one to accept us, it looked good to me because it's a huge media market. So if we can make a splash there, and if we can let people, a lot of people find out about us there, it'll be good, and there's other elements to it too besides just the film. We're bringing out one of our hip-hop artists that had 7 songs on the soundtrack, a guy named Clockwise. His manager and Clock, they're both coming out to Seattle with us.
That's great.
And Clockwise is going to be performing in Seattle. So all these people in the music scene out there, which is also huge, they're going to hear about this movie when they go to see this guy perform. So, really it's about getting our name out there and trying to kind of break out of the, we're good Connecticut filmmakers. We want to be, we're good filmmakers. So I think this is a good way to do that.
But give us the inside scoop, Marty. How is a Connecticut-based filmmaker, selling out a screening, a film festival screening 3,000 miles away? How much of that is your network, your sort of fan base, or who you're dealing with, and how much of that is sort of the Seattle True Independent Film Festival and their base? Because I've had films screen all over the country, film festivals all over the country, and it's not uncommon for a film festival to maybe have just a handful of people that actually attend the screening. It's very challenging. How did you do it?
Well, I can speak my own personal work. Over the last couple of years, the people that I've met on Twitter who are in Seattle, people that I've been on Facebook who are in Seattle, I've kept track of where all my filmmaker friends live, And, you know, I've got as big a list in Austin as I do in Seattle, as I do in Orlando. And, you know, once we found out that that's where we're going, I just contacted all my friends that were there. And I said, look, it's not unlike crowdfunding. You know, you contact these people and you say, listen, we got great news. The film that we made here a year and a half ago just got into this festival. You know, is there any chance you could go to the screening? If you can, awesome. Can you tell your friends about us? It's the same thing. And, you know, there's a girl, Aria, who I've become friends with on Facebook. I followed her short film, Spider, a couple of years ago. And we just, you know, stayed in contact, talking every now and again. You know, not every day. And when I found out that it got in, I contacted her and I said, hey, great news. I'm coming to town in a month. You know, can you let your friends know about us? And she said, absolutely. She started contacting all of her friends. They bought a couple of tickets. So for them, you know, it's a night out to go see a cool movie. But for Aria, you know, it's a chance to meet a guy that we've been talking with online for the last couple of years and, you know, who's also a filmmaker. So it's a very similar process to crowdfunding as far as getting tickets sold.
And lastly, Marty, what I love about you is that you're so resourceful. You know, you're generous with your time. And you seem like you're always busy and inventive and all these things. And it's great. It was great to watch you too, like in action with the students, and then in between like the screening, you were helping someone with their project. What do you do to unwind and relax? And because I'm sure, I mean, you seem like you're such a giver. How do you have Marty time? Because you just seem like such a generous person.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I wish I had more Marty time. I mean, pretty much these days, like, I hang out at home a lot. You know, I live with some really great guys, so, you know, we'll hang out and watch baseball and have a beer and just chat. You know, it's cool. The guys that I live with have nothing to do with the movie industry. So, you know, I have as much of a chance of talking about, you know, fixing cars as I do, you know, talking about the Oscars. So that's always cool. Like singing karaoke. I'm not much of a singer, but I like doing it.
What's your best hit? What's your best karaoke?
Oh God.
Don't Stop Believing.
No, definitely not. Don't Stop Believing. Anything hip hop is usually where I do the best work. So
that's very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've been speaking with Marty Lang, writer, director, and producer of Rising Star. For more on Marty and Rising Star, please visit risingstarmovie.com, on Twitter at risingstarmovie and Marty_Lang. Don't forget the underscore. And also facebook.com/risingstarmovie.
So, yeah. Thank you again, Marty. You know, it's great. You know, I'm envious that you've been able to shoot and finish a feature in Connecticut.
That's really cool.
It's been great to connect with you here on Film Courage, and we're super excited for the upcoming world premiere. To think that you've already sold it out already, it's extraordinary. So just congratulations.
Yeah,
we just wish you nothing but success.
Yeah, and it was great to hang out with you this weekend. So.
Yeah. Same here, guys.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Marty.